Welcome, everyone. My name is Kevin Bielmeyer, and I will be leading us through this Zoom at noon today, which continues our Southbury webinar COVID-19 series. And I'm very happy today to have a special guest joining us. The topic today is the emotional side of reopening. And joining us today to talk about this is a special guest, someone I've known for many years. Happy to call him a friend as well, Mr. Ron Karuchi. And I want to tell you a little bit about Ron before we get started. You may have read this in the material they sent out, but Ron is a nationally recognized leadership consultant, best-selling author. He's the co-founder and managing partner at Novelant. I'm going to ask him to tell us a little bit about that, working with CEOs and executives pursuing transformational change for their organization, their leadership, and the industry. He's a best-selling author of 8 books, including the recent Amazon, maybe not quite so recent, but I know it keeps popping back up there to #1 on Amazon. The book is Rising to Power, that he wrote with a colleague. He's also a regular contributor to the Harvard Business Review, something we'll talk about today, because he just had an article applicable to this topic this week. Also Forbes, 2-time TEDx speaker. In fact, I included one of the links to the TED Talk with one of the invite promos I sent out. So look for that. His work's also been featured in Fortune, CEO Magazine, Inc., Business Insider, MSNBC, Business Week, and Smart Business. But of course, what tops of them all is the Southbury webinar series. So we're very happy to have you with us, Ron. And Ron, I just thought a good place to start before we sort of launch into this topic is tell us a little bit about Novelant and the work that you do there, and just kind of give us a sense of you know what life is like as a leadership consultant.
Yeah, well, thanks, Kevin, for having me. I appreciate it. And nice to meet you all. So anyway, Novelant is, we're 15 years old. When I moved out here in Seattle 15 years ago, we began the firm. We have offices in Atlanta and Kansas City as well, and our consultants are everywhere. We spend our days walking along the likes of all kinds of leaders, mostly leaders of large and mid-sized enterprises who are facing some profound change. They're in a ditch. They can't get unstuck. There's something about their organization, their customers, their strategy that's not working. And so our job is to come alongside them and do some really good diagnosis to understand what's getting them stuck. Sometimes they're the problem. Sometimes the way they've built the organization isn't right for what they want to accomplish. And sometimes they have leaders who aren't ready to take the helm and take the hill the way they need them to. So our job is to help them figure out a plan to get where they want to go and to accompany them on that journey.
That sounds like very interesting work. Now, how long have you been with this particular organization?
So I'm one of the founders of Novelant. So me and another friend founded the organization 15 years ago, and have never looked back. Never imagined myself being an entrepreneur or starting a company. That I'm happy to help entrepreneurs start theirs, but it's never something I aspired to. I don't know that I was very good at it. But we're a great firm. We're a great community of practitioners. We're all very passionate about our work. And I think the one thing our clients all over the world have told us that sets us apart is how deeply we care about their success.
Empathy, right? You empathize. So it has, what's a tidbit that now that you're an entrepreneur, or at least now over the past 15 years you're an entrepreneur, what do you look at anything differently when it comes to talking to entrepreneurs, having now been one and been sort of walk that walk? You're not just talking the talk.
It's the cliche about the cobbler's kids having no shoes is just so true. A change management firm has a hard time changing. I think the one classic thing that most entrepreneurs get wrong, and maybe we didn't do so well in either, is you're never too small to have a strategy. You have to have the answer to the question of what is your identity? Who are you? Why would somebody, whenever I ask entrepreneurs for the strategy, or I get the mission statement, I get a vision statement, I get some counterfeit. But when I ask, okay, that's all very interesting, but tell me why a customer would choose you over somebody else. There's somebody up the street doing what you do. There's somebody in the next town over doing what you do. Why would they pick you? They can't answer. And so until you know what sets you apart, until you know what capabilities make you unique, you're not going to invest the right way in your work. You're going to spread your resources thin over everything as if it was equal. All work in your organization, if you have 3 people or 200 people, isn't the same. And so you have to know who you are, and you have to stay in that swim lane. And most entrepreneurs don't like saying no. They don't want to declare and commit to a particular place of competition. They want to compete with anybody. And of course, then you just take any money that comes in the door, and then that's a real dangerous slippery slope. So know who you are, or know how to organize your work so that your competitive work, the work that makes you special, stays apart from the work that keeps the lights on. And then know how to lead. And part of knowing how to lead is how to lead your people to bring their best performance and their best selves. You know, when you're a small business employer, remember your employees have other options, right? So, you know, they can go to bigger organizations and work and get more stable money, but they can also not be invisible. The one thing you have to offer as a small business is the ability for somebody to be seen and known and to stand out. And if you're not doing the things that allow that opportunity to happen, you're undermining the very reason why a great talent would come your way. And the last thing is you have to lead your company's story. So many entrepreneurs don't understand that it's supply and demand. It's not just supply. You actually have to drive demand. And you say the word marketing to an entrepreneur and they want to roll their eyes. They think, well, I have a website, or we send out emails. And the digital world today is a vast domain of confusion. The internet itself is a lawless place of dumb. And how you set, you know, it is highly unlikely that people are going to find their way to you on a path that does not go through the internet somehow. And if you can't be found, then all those customers that you could have had are not going to find you. So you have to be able to curate your story as well. And most entrepreneurs just like bristle, including us. That was one we didn't get right. We're still getting it right. So anyway, that was
it's almost like if you don't exist in the real estate, let's call it the real estate of the internet, because that's essentially what it is. You know, you park yourself, you create your website, etc. You have a piece of real estate, but if you don't exist there, one could argue you don't exist.
You wouldn't. It wouldn't be a hard argument to win. You know, if you're an accounting firm, you know, somebody just new to Southbury says accounting firms in Southbury. There's no guarantee you're going to come up. Right? Google may not decide to use you to answer the question. Google is deciding and curating the answers to questions that people are asking. And if they decide that you're not a credible answer, you're going to be on page 3.
And you never even get to page 3.
No one's going to page 3. Yeah. Now, I think that eventually people are going to wind up on page 2 because if they're going to start to realize quickly that everybody on page 1 paid to be there. But okay, then pay to be there, right? But there's no guarantee that just because you're a thing in Southbury, if somebody would even put that in Southbury, but what about people in Danbury or people in Richfield who you might help? How will the people that you want to serve, or people, if you're a remote business and can work virtually, people all over the world, how will they find you? It's the plethora of other people that do what you do. If they can't find you, you're relying on a whole lot of luck to drive your demand. Not a good strategy.
So before I leave this and get into the topic at hand, one of the things that struck me was, you know, let's say you are that entrepreneur. You do know who you are. You do have your story. You are so focused, and you know your people are motivated, and they feel like they're a part of the solution and part of the team. And then all of a sudden, COVID hits, or another type of disaster, crisis. And suddenly, you know, and I know it's a popular buzzword going around, you know, everywhere, but it's a truism, is the pivot, right? The pivoting. And I think almost, you know, as defined as someone can be, then now they have to shift, right? They have to be nimble, or they have to suddenly rethink what it is I do and who am I.
So the word pivot is true, right? But the agility to do that, it would have had to have been built before the crisis, right? So you know the old cliche: never plant the tree the day you need the shade. And so if most of what's happening, sadly, with COVID, is that it's not causing businesses to fragment or get frozen. It's revealing. their lack of agility. It's not causing it. If you had look at how many businesses, we have 5-star Michelin restaurants here in Seattle, beloved restaurants, doing pizza parties in the parking lot and showing home movies and doing bingo nights, right? And feeding healthcare workers. People have found ways to dig deep and flex and not get paralyzed by this, but see it as an opportunity. How many companies are making masks in the early days? And so if you're creative and if you look at what can we do to serve the customers who are loyal to us with what we have now, all over New York City, there are restaurants who went out and went in their back storeroom and put out a shelf in the lobby and are selling it was a Mexican restaurant in Fide in New York City, put out all the supplies in their kitchen. And they're now a grocery store because they don't have to sell food. So people are getting tremendously resourceful and creative. If that resourcefulness wasn't there before the catastrophe, it's going to be a little bit harder to find it now. It doesn't mean you can't. Sure. You can't dig deep and find it, but it does mean that you're going to have to double down and decide that you can't be paralyzed by this. And if you're not willing to see it as an opportunity, if you're catastrophizing, and now we're getting into a topic at hand about the emotional side of this, if you're catastrophizing and all you're seeing is Armageddon, you'll make it come true. But if you're, sorry?
Self-prophesizing, basically.
Absolutely. And now you're going to make it so. And that's unfortunate because there's no reason a business, even if at its most dire moment, can't survive this and even thrive through it, if that's what you choose to do with your team, huddling and digging deep and figuring it out. But if you have predispositions to significant control needs, if you have needs for predictability, if you're really uncomfortable with ambiguity, if you have any predispositions to pessimism or cynicism or worse, fatalism, and this crack in the earth reveals those things, you might not fare too well.
Right. Let me just jump to this real quick, and our topic at hand of the emotional side of reopening. And why this topic? Well, a couple of reasons. One is we did a survey here in Southbury, as many surveys have been done, on the impact of COVID-19. And one of the things it revealed was that over half of the businesses in the town that took the survey requested more guidance on mental health issues for owners, leaders, and their employees. So we are trying to take a look at all the things that the businesses in the community were looking for in terms of support and information. Something you had in one of your articles was the recent Pwc survey of 1,100 workers that found 70% of the workers say there are factors that would prevent them from wanting to return to work, and over half, 51%, cited fear of getting sick as their major worry. So, with sort of those couple stats, I thought, I want to throw out two other things. One is that Connecticut just, I think it was yesterday, delayed phase 3, seeing what's going on elsewhere in the country. Obviously, this Metroplex, New York City Metroplex area was the hot spot, the sort of ground zero, really, New York City for COVID-19 in America. But now there's, because of mitigation efforts and all that has happened in the last several months, now the tri-state area is the area of the country doing the best, I would say, relatively speaking. So they're seeing all of the flare-ups happen, and now, we put a pause on phase 3. But a silver lining note is just yesterday was the first day in Connecticut since March 1st that Connecticut has 0 reported COVID deaths. So that's a positive. But this is why we're talking about this topic. Obviously the fear and anxiety is out there, understandably. You recently wrote a piece in Forbes focused to leaders on how to prepare for the mental health challenges of reopening. And just this week, your article in the Harvard Business Review focusing more on the employee on how to prepare yourself for the return to the office. So I thought let's start with the problem. Okay, what you referred to in one of the pieces as lost in the unfamiliar.
Well, so let's set the table here for the entrepreneurs that are here to recognize that everybody's feeling anxious about this, right? You're feeling anxious. You're carrying the anxiety of your employees. Some of who are saying, I can't wait to get out of my house. Some of who are saying, I'm not coming in, right? You're balancing a myriad of factors here. You're having to split the difference between who can work from home, what work can't be done. If you're a restaurant, your bookkeeper can work from home, but you need restaurant workers and you need people to cook and serve the food.
Right.
So how do you balance the dynamics of people's anxiety when you have your own anxiety? Recognize that's the context we're talking. And it's so important to not ignore that. These are levels of anxiety that are unprecedented. And if you're predisposed to dismiss them, like you want us to get over yourself, or, hey, we're all stressed here. The minute you dismiss the feelings of somebody, you've now cemented them. So as stressful, this is a high wire act with no net, right? That's what this is. So if you're not crazy, that's what this is. But you have to remember that that's the place we're starting from in making these choices. When we went out the doors to go work from home or figure out how not to work at all, and we turn our dining rooms into offices and our basements into classrooms and our backyards into gyms, and the interesting thing about that was not nearly as hard as this is, because that was all unprecedented. We all knew we didn't know what we were doing. We all knew we were making up that as we went along. And so your brain has a way of reacting to those kinds of challenges, and your frontal lobe kicks in with adrenaline, and we get excited. It's a creative challenge. We get to conquer the dining room office. We get to conquer the basement classroom.
Right.
And we give ourselves permission to do that because we already know we don't know what to do. So by default, whatever we choose is going to work. The problem with going back to work is that our brains won't be tricked again, because our brains have already stored up all kinds of shortcuts, right? Our brains are lazy organs. They want to do it the least amount of processing possible. So that's why you can drive to work without ever remembering how you got there, right? So
right.
Around our offices, around our restaurants, around our dry cleaners, around our small businesses, we have shortcuts. We know where the coffee is. I know how to park my car. I know how to walk in the door and go to my cubicle. I know where I have meetings. And so our brains are going to start reflexively reaching for all those shortcuts when I walk in the door, and suddenly they won't work. There'll be a sign that says, do not sit here. There'll be someone taking our temperature. There'll be a mask on people's faces. I can't go use the conference room. People will be 6 feet apart from each other on the coffee line. I can't park in my spot. I got to park in another spot. My hours have changed and they're staggered. And every time your brain reaches for a shortcut, it will get short-circuited by the new requirements. And that is exhausting. Our brains have to then switch. It may take 7 seconds, but that 7 seconds, 10, 15 times a day for the first couple of weeks will be draining. Think of it like taking your cell phone battery out into the woods, right? And it's looking for a tower and you're watching the battery do this. Your frontal lobe of your brain is where the battery pack is for your ability to process. And the drain will like this, will just go quicker, which means your nerves will be frayed. Your judgment will be impaired. Your emotional regulation factors will be limited. And you have to go in recognizing that and take lots of deep breaths. And grace and compassion are your best allies here. Do not get caught up in the moment of letting yourself get to the place where your battery is so drained that you snap, and because this is a long game, right? If you decide that your life and your business hang in the balance of one parking spot over, or one temperature taking too many, or one person being upset about the PPE requirements too many, you will put your business on the brink of disaster far quicker than COVID will. And so you have to remember there's a much bigger story here. Your business is part of a much bigger story. Your dreams for your business, your vision for what you want it to become are no different now. They may take a slightly different path, but if you lose sight of the passion for why you're there in exchange for the frustration of what you have to do now, you will preside over your demise, not the virus. So grace and compassion become such critical allies in those moments.
Absolutely. I think, one of the things that strikes me about just entrepreneurs or people that, start their own business and now they maybe have 2 employees or 5 employees or 30 employees, right? And this also goes for nonprofits, people that have taken the helm of a nonprofit, executive director, but maybe the majority of the people are either, volunteers or staff. But one of the things that often strikes me is that nobody is the expectation, let's say, that the people working for you are going to have the same level of passion about the business as you do. So in this moment of crisis, maybe you're going into just battleships, all systems go and going 7 days a week and worrying and caring and stressing and carrying all this burden, but it's yours, and I think that kind of going back to what you said about whether you've, in this case, created the culture of it being ours, are your people going to, maybe as they see it, put their lives on the line, take risks that maybe you wouldn't think twice about taking because it's yours, it's your baby, and
it's a great question for that. It's such a great question, Kevin. And you know what? If this crisis revealed that you were a solo act, and you turned all your employees into spectators, watching you be the hero and jump through all the hoops, and they're cheering you on, and you've set up a culture where it's you're center stage all the time, and then you get to go home and complain about that. That's revealing your pathology. That's revealing your need for centricity, and you've not built that level of ownership and passion and commitment to a greater cause or a greater story about your business. If your bus boy or bus girl sees yourself as I'm the minimum wage bus boy for 8 hours a week, that's what I do here. Not I get to be part of serving great food to people and feeding families, right? So if you did not help people connect their own purpose to your purpose, do it now. Like it's not too late. Use this crisis to bring your team together and be vulnerable and say, you know what this is showing me? This is showing me that I've taken you for granted, that I did not create an experience here for you worthy of you wanting to commit to me. And I'm sorry for that, but I need you now. More than ever, I can't do this alone. So I'm asking you, and be specific. I need you to want to come to work. I'll keep you safe. I'll do what I have to. I'll buy your PPE. I'll get you Uber rides home. You do what you have to do to put your skin in the game, to show them you'll meet them there if you're going to ask them to sacrifice or take risks. Your vulnerability now to own that you didn't create the environment you should have is your greatest ally. Hide that and you're dead, because they will watch you go down the drain, but you didn't invite them to go with you. You invited them to be a spectator and punch a clock and do their job. And so they're not going to just suddenly show up now, right? So if you need them now, you need to own that.
That's great advice. Something that just sparked a thought in my head as we're talking about this aspect of it, this openness and empathy, and also just acknowledgement, right, of the need for team. Also, there's almost somewhat the flip, and the flip being, the leader that is a bit, say, stoic, or I got this under control, you have nothing to worry about, I'm in charge, et cetera, and maybe isn't willing to acknowledge they don't have all the answers, that they don't have, the new information is flying in every day, and it's very frustrating to everyone, frankly, that the rules keep changing, the goalposts keep getting moved, right? Just when you think you got it figured out, all of a sudden it changes the next day, because of, now it's transmitted, in this case with the pandemic, it's transmitted by the air. No, it's on surface. How long is, now it's 72 hours. But there's just so many factors on this that are moving. And just talk a little bit about, from a leadership standpoint, and I think the word I'm looking for to center on is trust.
Yeah, great question, Kevin. So let's just put this BS right on the table. If you're a leader looking to appear in control right now and providing false levels of reassurance to people, first of all, you're seen right through. Nobody's buying it, and you're probably dangerous. This is not the time for dishonesty. Even with the best of intentions, you being a benevolent patriarch is not, or matriarch, is not what's needed right now. I watched one of my clients in the middle of a virtual town hall. And the nice thing about virtual town halls is that I can be on the chat room texting him. And we had prepared him. This was a big company thing. There was bad financial news. He was being incredibly transparent. And he thought he was prepared. But some of the Q&A, during the Q&A, somebody asked him, this was early in the pandemic process, before any of the government support was clear, and we know what a disaster that was in terms of clarity. Somebody said, "Are we going to be eligible for that money, and how are we getting it?" He got triggered. right? What he heard was, what are you doing to save our jobs? Right? Because the person was upset and emotional. Wasn't the question at all. So he got defensive. He got dismissive. He went, this is under control. We're working on this. He was all kinds of reassuring and dogmatic. And it was a disaster, right? And I texted him and I said, mop up that mess. That's not the truth. Go back and clean that moment up. And he did. He went back and said, you know what? That was a bad, I'm sorry. I don't know the answer to your question. What I suspect is under your question is I'm worried about my financial well-being. And you have a right to be. So let me tell you what we're going to do. What I know for now we're going to do to help you. Let me tell you what we're working on to see what we're eligible for with the government. And here's how I think we'll keep you informed. Just go back and own that you don't know. Right. Sometimes I don't know is the most credible answer you can give. And say what you do know. A lot of times leaders think, well, just saying there's a team meeting this week isn't saying anything very much. To the person who's hungry for information, it's a lot. Right. So let go of your need to appear in control and offer reassurance. False reassurance is dangerous because you will set expectations. People will latch on. I had another client who she was with one of her employees virtually in a meeting, and it was one of those moments where the employee just broke. And she was sad and stressed and anxious. She had kids at home. She was not coping well with the early days of this. And she said, I just want to know when this is all going to be over. And with the best of intentions, the leader said, well, I've heard that we're going to start reopening in June. Within 7 minutes, literally within 7 minutes, she had 4 texts. We're opening in June? I have to go back in June? What's happening in June? Are there something happening in June? Why would you set that fuse in motion? So when somebody is stressed and asking questions, listen for the question beneath the question, right? Listen for what they're really saying. What that woman was really saying is, I don't know how much more I can endure this. And try and meet the need that they're asking for, not the words that they're saying. Sometimes the best answer to a question like that is with a deeper question. A great question for that boss to ask would have been, tell me what your worst nightmare is. Tell me what your biggest fear is. Because a lot of times the monster under the bed is much bigger than the monster that's real. Just ask what they think. A great question is, what's the worst thing you ever survived in your life? What's the hardest thing you've ever lived through? Because oftentimes it's far worse than this. And what you can invite them to is, if you had the resilience to withstand that so triumphantly and so courageously, how can that resilience help you now? Invite people to their experience base to show them you're capable of withstanding this. Don't try and put your Band-Aid on it, because all you're doing is self-comforting yourself. You're self-soothing. It's not in their interest that you're saying the things you are, it's your own.
Right. No, that's excellent. I think, helping them understand that they recognize that they have conquered great things, done great things, had experiences they've overcome, and they too will come through that. And being specific about it, and getting them to be specific about it is great. One of the things you talk about, and it's kind of intertwined in this, is the continually resetting expectations. Go a little further into that thought.
Well, they're going to your point earlier, Kevin, they're going to keep changing, right? So people, here again, our brains you'll be surprised at how quickly our brains create new shortcuts. Within 2 days, I now know the 6 feet distance by the coffee pot.
Right.
On day 6, you move the coffee pot. Right? Just sends them right over the edge, right? So you have to help people recognize that. Don't get too comfortable, right? We know things are changing, regulations are changing, requirements are changing. I have one client, oh my gosh, it's in Los Angeles. He runs a nursing home.
God bless him.
And COVID tests are being shipped across the country. They're getting lost. Patients are sitting in the parking lot waiting to be admitted to the nursing home. He's like, well, where's your COVID test? We don't have one. Well, I can't let the patient in. What do we do?
Very emotional.
The county health department comes in with completely conflicting requirements to the CDC, whose requirements completely conflict the state's requirements. And so if you comply with CDC, you're out of compliance with the county or the state. And you say that to the person from the county, and they're like, oh, we don't work for the CDC. What are you to do, right? You just want to throttle somebody. These are the days we're living in right now. And you have to just go, I cannot control this. And it's okay. It's really going to be okay. It sucks, but it's going to be okay. Allow yourself to grieve the loss of control without exerting or imposing levels of false certainty on the situation, and take a breath take a breath and go, okay. And rather than putting the person in front of you into the position of opposition or as an adversary, put them on the same side of the table and say, well, we both are looking at a pretty interesting situation here. What would you suggest we do? What would you
almost get them to
join the problem with you? Don't make them the problem. Invite them to help you solve the problem. The minute you vilify somebody, and there's a lot of people to vilify right now, including all of you who are bosses, can get vilified by your people, right?
Sure.
The minute you vilified somebody and objectified them as the enemy or your problem, you probably cut yourself off from a source of wisdom you really need. Say to them, you know what? I'm sure you're probably as perplexed and frustrated as I am right now. What would you suggest we do?
That's great.
And find your way to some weird middle ground that you can live with.
But in a follow-up to that, if you do that, be open to suggestion, right? It's like what could be worse than going, hey, do you have any great ideas? Let's hear them.
Yeah.
You hear them and you go, yeah, we're not doing any of that.
Well, now here's the thing. So expectations, right? We all don't use faux inclusion. Don't make it look like you're trying to involve people in a choice where you don't really have it. Well, you already know what you want to do, because that will frustrate them.
Right.
Don't ask for advice you're not willing to take. It isn't. You are not obligated to take it. Right? You can ask for ideas, saying, "I have no idea if I'm going to act upon this or not, but I know my brain alone can't solve this. But there's 8 brains here. Maybe we can.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try." So set your expectations that you have to be the winner here, or that your idea has to prevail. That when we get to a place we're all going to agree to, we're all going to support it regardless of whose idea prevailed. And create the expectation that we have to solve this. I don't have an answer. Or if you have a predisposed answer to, I think this is the answer, but I'm not sure, tell them that. Now, if your people go, well, he's already decided, say, I haven't. I really haven't, right? Now, if you're somebody who's trained them to know that you always want your way and that you always get your way, don't expect them to sort of show up to the table with brilliant ideas all of a sudden. You've trained them. So you may have to untrain them to realize you actually are open to advice and having your mind changed, and then prove it. Let them change your mind.
How does that compare to, say, a suggestion box, the anonymous suggestion box?
Do people really still use those?
I don't know. Just came to my mind is like, okay, I want to give my opinion, but I don't want you to criticize before it, or I don't want you to judge before it. So you know what? If you had a suggestion box, I'd put it anonymously in there and hope you don't recognize my handwriting.
So now you just revealed a deeper problem, right? If anonymity is what people need to tell you the truth, you can be very sure your leadership sucks, right? I tell my clients all the time, if somebody that works for you is not, somebody in your community or group is not regularly coming into your office telling you something that's uncomfortable for you to hear, you can be very sure your leadership sucks. It should not require courage to tell the truth. If the psychological safety needed for people to share their radical ideas, say hard things, point out problems, is not present in your workplace, you have become a solo act. And it's going to be far harder to create the psychological safety you need now. So your only answer is plead for it, and make it credible. And do not react defensively or dismissively when you hear hard feedback. You may not be a great boss, and this crisis could have revealed that. And if it did, this is your chance to repent and become a better boss and commit to it. If you have people showing up in surprisingly committed, sacrificial, dedicated ways, that's feedback that you set the table well before this for people to care about the business that you built.
That always reminds me of the idea of finishing strong. Not to say that we're finished. Hopefully, we're not, at the end of our life, or the end of our rope, or the end of our business. But to your point of, change is possible. That there's amazing things that people are so resilient, and that if you do, become empathetic and you do ask them to forgive you and allow you to reset and restart. And the most famous example that I think of is like Scrooge. His whole life he's one way, everybody knows him that way. He's obviously a terrible boss to Bob Cratchit, and he's a terrible human being to everybody else around him, and a miser and all these things. And then wakes up after the ghost, and he's just changed, and how he finishes his life in a much different way. And
it required tremendous vulnerability, right? Now he had to do it with ghosts, but we don't have that luxury. We're not going to get visited in the middle of the night by ghosts, but you are going to be visited by memories. You are going to be visited by looking at yourself in a different mirror of how you've led and how you've cared for people that have dedicated their employment to you. And if you've seen them only as a payroll burden instead of a privilege to lead, you need to flip that script. I had one client, CEO of a small 100-person company, an industry that was badly hit by COVID, and they were deemed essential for a while, and then something changed, and a good part of the business was deemed discretionary. And he took over as CEO when they were already in a free fall. Things were already bad there. There were bloated costs, revenue was declining. There were multiple states. It's only 100 people, and these were younger people, and they've been very, very poorly led since the company had been founded. And he had to make some serious cuts. And he, like many leaders, felt obligated to sort of hide this, keep it to his chest, not shout people. And I said, why would you not be transparent with them? Why would you want to not engage them and try to figure out how to solve this? He goes, well, because then they'll panic and the best talent will bail. I said, well, how do you know you're not going to throw the best talent out if you cut heads? If that's going to be your answer to which you have to assume that at the top of your organization, if you've got more than 20 employees, you are probably the least qualified to make cost-cutting decisions because you don't know where the money is actually spent. I said to him, open the books, open the entire P&L budget, show them where all the red blood is, and say, everybody, help me save your jobs as best I can. I've seen this many times, and every single time, people are much harder on themselves than he would have been. They take pay cuts, they furlough, they go to 80%. They do all kinds of things, and they find costs hidden in the cracks of your organization that you don't even know are there. And they always come back with a plan that saves everybody's job. And when they absolutely can't, they find the money for good severance packages. But and by trusting them with such a hard moment, you've built their commitment. You've shown them that you care about them enough to open the books wide. Because sometimes opening those books is going to reveal some of your bad management too. So you have a phenomenal resource of people, even if you have not leveraged them well to now, even if you have not engaged them well now. If you need their brains, if you need their creativity and ideas, this is the time to bring them to the table, own what you have or haven't done before now, and get them on the field to play.
A grand example of that, a mega example, I would say, is through this COVID crisis has been the way the Virgin Empire, the Virgin Group has handled that exact thing you're talking about. I'm not saying they opened their books and showed them all the blood, but they did make that appeal across. They have many of their brands are travel related. You get Virgin Voyages and the Atlantic, and there's just so many parts of their portfolio were directly hit by this, and they reached out to their wide employee base and said, I don't know if they said it or asked for input, but what they ended up doing is collectively across the board they all reduced their salary by they got paid every other week, and they staggered it in order to keep everything going and keep it solvent and keep people's jobs. And keep it.
I think leaders, whether you're a small corner shop in Southbury, whether you want a regional corporation, whoever you are, you have to know that if when this is all over, you end up on the wrong side of history, the marketplace is going to punish you. People are not going to have short memories this time. And if you end up on the right side of history, the marketplace will reward you. If you were generous and compassionate and caring, to your people and to your customers, you will see that rewarded as this thing passes into history. But if you weren't, you'll pass into history.
Yeah, you and I spoke about this offline earlier. I remember the difference between just putting out a statement, let's say, about something, a statement that reflects, empathy to a community or to the world at large or to your town, versus action, versus demonstrable action, both internally for the organization and their employees, but also, more broadly with the community. So huge. Let's actually, before I leave the leadership side of things, let me just something we've certainly touched on a lot of what leaders can do to help their organization, to help their people that are working with them. But before we leave leaders and focus a little bit on employees, let me ask you this. The idea of taking care of yourself. I know I've talked to several of these business owners who are just, we're 4 months into this and they haven't even had a day off. I mean, they're just going. And the risks involved with that
are high. And self-care is not selfish. We often assume that self-care is indulgent. It's not about pampering. If you're on the very basics, you're not getting enough sleep, if you're not getting good nutrition, if you're not exercising, at least going for a walk, it's like taking your cell phone out into the forest, letting the battery drain, throwing it in the water, and then wondering why it doesn't work. There's only one of you. Your business gets one of you. And if you don't steward that one of you well, you're the greatest threat to your business, not the virus. So if you have this obligation to be indispensable, that's your pathology. That's you trying to exert control over a lot of uncertainty by feeling in control and working 7 days a week because it meets your need for indispensability and relevance. Your business does not need that from you. And if you think it does, you built it wrong. You built it not to scale or grow or be healthy. If you are so central and so centric to that world, that means your identity is probably so fused with that business that you can't separate them. And you know what? I bet if I looked at your marriage or your family, I'd see the evidence of that. So be honest with yourself about your own needs, your own fallibility, and your own limitations. If you want this business to thrive long term, you have to care for yourself, your health, your sleep. You cannot not sleeping well, not eating well, not spending time with your family and people who love you, excessive isolation. These are dangerous health risks to your mental and physical health. Can you sustain it for a short season of time? Sure. My client who owns a nursing home, for example, or runs a nursing home 6 days a week, and his spouse and children are missing them, right? So for a season, sure. Indefinitely, no. You've got to put in safeguards. You've got to put in places for your body to rejuvenate, for your mind to rejuvenate. And if you're not doing that, you are absolutely inserting significant risk into your business.
And you just touched on something else, the uncertainty. Uncertainty is, I think, the biggest issue at hand right now. If an earthquake happens, it destroys a building or destroys even more, but then it's over and then you're recovering. We keep talking about recovery. We keep talking about post-pandemic and these things, but we're not there yet. And and here we are now, of course, reopening, and we all know that it's reopening to not completely utterly destroy the economy. And we can't just indefinitely be closed. So here we are reopening, but we know that we're not out of the woods. And as evidence, as we talked about, with the halt on phase 3. And I think that's the number one anxiety causer for the owners and the business leaders, but also of the employees, is the uncertainty.
And this is the dig deep thing in the face of uncertainty. Too many of us reach for false certainty. We reach for levels of control. Now, it's certainly a healthy thing to ask yourself in an honest way, what can I control right now? And how do I let go of what I can't control? That's an important assessment to do, because many of us overreach on what we think we can control when we really can't.
Sure.
And then we let go of the things we should be controlling. But the real issue you have to ask yourself is, what do I believe about hope? Hope is one of the most underleveraged resources for leaders. It is a critical capacity to create hope, to see a possibility where the evidence would suggest otherwise. You have to know how to create hope for yourself and those you lead. You have to know what sources of hope inspire you. You have to imagine a future that's better than the one you're in right now. You have to dig deep to the places where you've survived and thrived through difficult circumstances to remember reasons for hope. But you have to create it. It's the connection of what you're passionate about, where your faith resides in what you can't see, and things you want, your desires. If your desires for what you've always built this business for are diminishing because of the uncertainty, refuel them. Remember why you fell in love and started this business in the first place. Remember what it is you want to accomplish for your family and for your community. And rekindle those things and keep them alive and fresh, because hope is the absolute psychological and practical best resource and antidote against uncertainty.
That's excellent. And this directly ties into, talking about obviously employees, all this applies to them, especially the last point about hope, monitoring your anxiety, allowing yourself patience and flexibility are some of the things you talk about. Managing your own expectations as the leaders have been trying hopefully to manage theirs for you. This springboards off of hope, but talk a little bit about your what you wrote about being a source of joy.
One of the things we can all do to get our minds off our own story is bring joy to somebody else. Be lighthearted. Rather than being upset that somebody forgot to wear their mask, make a joke about it. Be lighthearted. I have a couple of companies who are doing these really fun rituals where they're sort of sharing their working from home missteps, with some of their worst moments, who sit up in the Zoom camera with their underwear on, whatever. And they're telling funny stories, which you can then transfer back to the office. Your transition back missteps. They're talking about some of their greatest surprises about working from home. I actually like my kids, turns out. I actually don't mind my spouse so much, turns out. I get, having more time at home. So create lightheartedness, create moments of joy and levity. And when someone is sad, go out of your way to be a source of joy for them. We can all do that for each other. And if you're a leader, create the expectation that your team does that we are a joy generating group. That we've all heard hundreds of stories of people in Holocaust camps or in dire conditions finding ways to bring levity and lightheartedness to their pain. It is an absolute underleveraged resource if you're not bringing joy to people. And as a boss, surprise them. Buy them give them a free meal, or buy them a gift card, or take them and get them some new clothes. Do something caring for them. In whatever form you can, bring joy, because we will all, in turn, bring joy to ourselves. When we know we brought a smile to someone else's face, we feel better. Our own sense of significance, our own sense of purpose is ignited by seeing our fingerprint that way in someone else's life. I think the question we all need to be asking ourselves is, as we think about what's the bigger story I'm part of here, we're living through a historical, unprecedented moment here. A year from now, when somebody asks you the question, who did you become through the COVID-19 virus? What kind of person did it shape you to become? How do you want to answer that question? Do you want to say, I barely got through it? Or do you want to be able to say, these are the profound things and lessons I gained and how I changed as a result? Because you get to decide. The pen for that story is still unwritten and it's in your hand. You get to decide the answers to those questions.
That's great. Yeah, I was hoping we would talk about that. I thought that was an excellent question to ask. If imagine like the grandchild, asking, so Grandpa, Grandma, tell me about living through COVID-19. I have the advantage of having my mother-in-law who is 92. She's in Iowa. I don't get to see her, but except on Zoom, which is and on FaceTime, which is fun. But one of the things that she keeps bringing up is I lived through polio, I lived through Spanish flu, and she'll talk about those days and how the similarities to today. But it also kind of reminds you that here she is, 92. She lived through these things. She came out the other side. So there's actually a real therapeutic and positiveness through those kinds of conversations and those kinds of memories. To recognize this.
Kevin, I wonder if we should. We have these eight wonderful folks here. I wonder if we should sort of turn it to them and say, "What's on your mind?" I'd love to hear some of your questions or hear some of your.
I would love to if anybody's willing to chime in or share. I know we've got a few minutes left here. If so, just reach over to your unmute button if you see it there on your screen, and just click on it. If you're doesn't matter if you're not with us visually, you can certainly jump in if you got a question for Ron or even just a comment on some of the stuff we've been discussing. be shy.
Don't all talk at once. Is this I mean, does this all make sense to you? Does any of it sound relevant to you?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Ethel Ann.
I'll be darned. I just really appreciate the note to us about if you discount what your employees or your wife or whoever is saying, done.
Yeah.
Done. The need to acknowledge the feelings is huge. I'm a grief recovery specialist.
Oh.
I am dealing with this all the time, and people come to me and they have just been shut down by other people.
Yeah.
Maybe not quite so brutal as get over it, but that happens.
Oh, sure.
Even when they've lost a spouse. So I am all for that. So keep it. Thank you.
Well said, Ethel. Well said.
Thank you, Ethel Ann. This is one of the things as I talk about the community of Southbury, where I am, is I was just beginning to sort of kind of, let's say, craft a narrative or talk about what Southbury is. And one of the things that overarchingly struck me was it's such a caring community. We have Heritage Village, we have a large senior population, we have 3 different nursing homes, lots of medical facilities here, not surprisingly. But why? And we have the Southbury Training School, which for 100 years or however long it's been going of caring for people with developmental disabilities. It is a caring community, and I think that says something. That's something we should exalt and promote and talk about, because not everybody gets to live in such a caring community. So I appreciate you coming on and talking to us, Ron, so much. This was a lot of fun. Before you leave, I'm just gonna share my screen real quick with everybody and let you all know the contact information if you would like to, there we go. If you would like to have a follow-up, if you'd like to reach out to Ron, there's his email address, his phone number at the headquarters there in Navalont in Seattle. But like I said, hopefully we look forward to seeing him soon. There's a link to his most recent book, Rising to Power, and then also there's an ebook on leading transformation, downloadable through Navalont as well. And you can also go to the website. There's the website, navalont.com. And there's my information, always available here as a business helpline, hotline. Don't hesitate to call or email and share something you're going through, help you need, or just information. I'm happy to do that. So with that, I'm going to bid everyone adieu. Thank you for joining us for this lunchtime Zoom at noon. And most of all, thank you, Ron, for sharing some of your time and wonderful thoughts.
A pleasure to be with you all. Take care, good care of Southbury, and nice to be with you.
Take care. Bye-bye now.